Good morning, everyone. And we have late night in New York and afternoon in Australia. So, very good morning, afternoon, and evening to all of you in various places. We're very happy to bring you the third in the series of international webinars that we are holding for Jairangam. A very good morning to Team Jairangam, Deepak Geraji, Hema Geraji, and big congratulations. I've been watching the festival every day with eclectic performances, wonderful workshops that you all are holding, and some very, very stimulating webinars. So today we're going to talk about negotiating with hybrid performance spaces or creating hybrid performance spaces. And we have Jeff Khan from Australia. We have Preeti
Okay.
Vasudevan. Hi, Jeff. We have Preeti Vasudevan joining us from New York, and we have our
Hi.
very own dear Vikram Iyengar joining us right here from Kolkata, where I am from, and that's in India. So I will take this moment to quickly introduce all the artists to all of you, and then we begin our conversation. Preeti Vasudevan is a choreographer and performer, creates provocative contemporary works from her Indian tradition. Founder and artistic director of Thresh Performing Arts Collaborative, her experimental productions foster a dialogue with identity and our relationship with heritage and contemporary life. She received the DPA Atelier Award, Lincoln Center Award for Emerging Artists, Jerome Robbins Division's Dance Research Fellowship, three Meta Awards for The Absent Lover, I remember that one, and seven Meta nominations for Savitri, I remember that one too, to name a few. Some of her commissions include works and process for Guggenheim Museum, Veiled Moon for the Metropolitan Museum of Art, Boxed for National Dance Institute, and Drumming a Dream for the Chamber Music Society of Lincoln Center. An artist, alumna of the US Department of State, her educational initiatives encourage self expression and artistic risk through cross cultural creative exchange among artists and the community. Preeti's website, The Red Curtain Project, shares ancient, modern, and mythological stories through visual presentations. Welcome, Preeti, and we look forward to hearing your latest initiatives and the ones that you are planning in near future. Jeff, a very good afternoon once again. And Jeff is here from Sydney. He's the artistic director and CEO of Performance Space Sydney, which does some amazingly exciting work. He's a writer and curator working across visual arts, dance, and performance, combining interdisciplinary projects with experimental practices, the facilitator of the 2013 National Dance Forum, the guest curator of New 12 for Museum of Contemporary Art, Australia. Jeff has also held roles at Gertrude Contemporary Perth Institute of Contemporary Art, John Curtin Gallery, and the Solomon R. Guggenheim Museum. At Performance Space, he is a researcher and overseer of the LiveWorks Festival of Experimental Art, which they have just culminated a couple of weeks ago, residencies, laboratories, and artist development programs. Jeff was the artistic director of Next Wave Festivals. Jeff is a jury member of the 2017 Taishan Art Award, the Australia Council, Create NSW, the National Portrait Gallery, and Bandanan Trust. That's wonderful, Jeff, and we are very excited to have a look at your work and hear about it from you.
Thank you.
Vikram, it gives me tremendous pleasure always to welcome you whenever we are working together. Vikram is an arts leader, connector, dancer, choreographer, director, curator, presenter, and arts researcher, writer. He's the co-founder and artistic director of Run and Performance Collective. He heads the Pickle Factory Dance Foundation, which is bringing a lot of wonderful work to the city of Kolkata, and this time they went digital. Trained in Kathak by Padma Shri Srimati Rani Karnaji, Vikram's performance brings together classical dance, movement, drama, and design, creating an experience of total theatre. He is an INLEX scholar, Art Think South Asia Arts Management Fellow, and Global Fellow of the International Society for the Performing Arts. Vikram has taught Asian and intercultural theatre in the UK. He is the recipient of the Indian National Scholarship and National Junior Fellowship for Dance and the 2015 Sangeet Natak Academy Ustad Bismillah Kha Yuva Puraskar for Contemporary Dance. He was the choreographer for Academy Award winner Florian Gallenberger's film Shadows in Time and co-choreographer on Helena Waldman's Faust prize nominated piece made in Bangladesh. Really looking forward to all the experience that you've created at Pickle Factory, Vikram. And I personally want to hear what are the various analysis or different things that artists from different places are doing over there. My first question would be to Preeti. Preeti, in December 6, 2020 e-paper, she writes, Preeti Vasudevan is taking Indian dance heritage to the youth in the West. How have you made this possible? Did you evolve a hybrid technique to make Bharatanatyam accessible? And you've also continued to work throughout the pandemic times, and you're currently working on few hybrid works. So, if you could share a bit of the basic foundation and the work that you've done, and also the recent times that you've faced and where you've created and negotiated with this hybrid space.
Sure. Thank you so much. I'm so thrilled to be part of this, and just listening to everybody else's bio, I'm like, God, uh, it's this amazing, amazing achievement. So I'm very, very happy and honored to be in the presence of our wonderful
Our
panelists this
pleasure
evening.
entirely.
Um, well, I think the article you're talking about is a wonderful article, and I think it was very specific for which focused on our project that we started in 2020. I just think there are many artists before me who've come over here and shown Indian dance and heritage to youth in America. So I'm not the first one. But I think in current times, it's very important to think about creative ways of engaging storytelling amongst youth so that the messaging and the vocabulary, while distinct, can also become very universal. And that's part of what I do. So my company called Thresh, as in a threshold, is precisely deals with that. So the whole idea of Thresh is, the threshold. It's all about now. It's about the present situation. So I say that you bring a lot of past with you, and you go into an unknown future. So what really matters is what you do now.
Yeah.
And so rules are inverted, laws are broken, purists are very angry. We stir the pot in some very fun ways. And we fall flat on our faces many times, but we also get up and get going, which is a very, very important part of art making. Because if we just led from one successful production to the next, then we're not really doing a proper job. We're probably doing an assembly line production. Because part of learning through every process is that that every production is a step towards the next one, and there's a learning curve through each one. So this year, I think for all of us really has been the biggest learning curve. Firstly, how to survive, and then secondly, I believe that during the as creative artists, we're asked to be creative, right? So we're asked to think outside the box and problem solve in some ways. So if this situation does not allow us to get there, I don't know what can.
Yes.
And I feel it's a very, very fertile time for artists to come together and really dig deep and really question what we're doing, why we're doing it, and for whom we're doing it. So those were very fundamental questions that my organization met with as soon as we realized that New York was going to shut down. And all the performance halls are closing, which still haven't opened. And living in a city like New York, which is one of the biggest meccas of performing arts. When that shuts down, all of a sudden there's a big reality check going on over here.
Yeah.
So we thought that we would completely go digital
Mhm.
and virtual, and decided that we would take stories to families, because that, especially in the early part of the pandemic, you had a lot of isolation and distancing, and people didn't know what was going on, a lot of anxiety. And I thought to myself that when you're anxious, where do you go? you know and then I thought, well, the whole term called soul food
Mhm.
comes to you, and that sort of goes back in time to your grandparents or your aunt or uncle or whoever it is, way back when you were a child, and something was given to you that made you feel comfortable,
Yes,
safe, and connected.
true.
So for me, I thought, well, I am an artist, so for me, that soul food are the stories.
Yes.
And since I come from India, I thought, well, the first place I would reach back is to my own roots, and
Yes.
then evolve from there and eventually branch out into more global stories.
Mm.
So Thresh actually initiated the project called the Red Curtain Project, what you mentioned, Ramanjit. So the Red
Mm.
Curtain Project is a storytelling website. It's 100% digital that
Mhm.
we've created, and there are two reasons why it's called the Red Curtain Project. It's one, because the curtain itself in the theater world is a liminal space. So
Mhm.
anything about a curtain is, it unveils, and the notion of red is very symbolic in all cultures.
Mm.
And the other very practical thing is, in my apartment, I have a red curtain,
Wow.
which just became my
Lucky
backdrop all
you.
the time. So there was some uniformity to all the stories that I've said so far, because they have the red curtain behind me, and people start to take notice of it, actually, which is very, very,
Right.
very funny.
So
And
all the red curtain happened during the digital times. I mean, the pandemic times.
yes, we closed in
And the
March. We
project of
started the storytelling in April.
mm,
So we did an absolute dive in. We converted everything. We just rolled up our sleeves. We started gathering stories. We got licensing rights from children's publishers.
mm,
In India, we started working with Tulika, which is a great a
yeah.
publishing company for children. Then we've also expanded into other companies. Then we started partnering with other cultural organizations, and then like Thresh is a project based company, which means that over the years we've now generated a massive rolodex of artistic collaborators.
Mm,
So I just had to email a bunch of composers, visual artists, storytellers, what have you, and request if they would take at a very reduced rate, if they could collaborate with me to
mm,
create these stories. Now, no, none of us could meet each other, so the idea of hybrid space came into being. How do
yes.
you change the idea of performance space? Um, to make it accessible but also theatrical.
Mm,
So that if people saw, they said, "Oh yeah, I have a curtain like that in my house. Maybe I can storytell too." So it was the idea is about inclusivity.
mm,
So we started using the technology in a very simple format. We didn't want to go crazy with special effects or multi-camera angles and all that. We just, no, let's clean the slate, keep it simple, and under 8 minutes, and that's it. But the idea of that became that we have a performance video, and then we have a whole series of behind the scenes, where you actually we have a way of understanding the breakdown of the vocabulary, which is Bharatanatyam for me, just to put it in context, and some questions about what I do. So, if we have a little time, I'd love to show one
yeah.
of the
Let's
examples.
show them. Yeah.
And
Let's
this
show
one
the
in
video.
particular, is inspired by the Panchatantra of the elephant king and the mouse.
Mm-hmm.
They get trapped. But this collaboration is a very special one, because the amazing cellist Yo-Yo Ma really liked this project, and so we were talking, and then I said, "Why don't we do a story together?" And he said, "Wonderful." And he said,
Mm,
I have a little stuffed elephant that was gifted to me from Indonesia called Imbo, and can we somehow incorporate Imbo in this story? So we basically rewrote the script inspired by the Panchatantra, and we created the story together. And the visual artist for this is a Native American artist from Montana. And both of
Mhm.
us have the experience of the Native American world in Montana. So there was a common world for us. So I requested Elena Buffalo Spirit, who's wonderful artist who does ledger artwork, and asked
Mhm.
her to create the artwork. Of course, she's never seen an elephant, so it was wonderful to see her interpretation. So it's about 9 minutes long, but I just to show some excerpts would be great. So, just to
Yes.
get a feel of how we made it simple, but we
Yeah.
just wanted to be, like as if you were sitting like a bear tech and watching it in front of
Yes.
you.
Absolutely.
So the
Ankit,
one
if
I
we
would
could,
say is
yeah.
the one that's called Yo-Yo Ma.
So Ankit, Team Jairangam, if we could look at Yo-Yo Ma that we were trying to play just now before the
That's right.
audience came in. Would be lovely. Ankit, are you with us? Anyone listening to us from Team Jairangam? Maybe he's trying, he's on mute and he's trying to get it going. Yeah. I can hear something happening, but I don't see the visual. Ankit, I can hear some sounds, but the visual isn't happening. So, no, we don't see the visual. So, Preeti, if you could continue telling us about it, or we can go to Jeff and Ankit can try that later.
Totally, totally. I mean, I'm
In
open
the
to
meantime,
either.
if my team from the Creative Arts Academy could call up Ankit and check what's happening, so we will know what exactly is the scene. So, what we'll do for now, Preeti, will move to Jeff,
Absolutely.
listening to his part of the experiences that he has created recently, which have been very exciting.
Yeah,
So, that would be great.
that's fantastic.
Uh, yeah. So, coming to you, Jeff, I would say that you've created some amazing hybrid work with the live work. Ankit, the sound is not right, and we don't see the visual. Okay, we get it. So if you could make it full screen, can we play it from the beginning, Ankit? Because we have missed the beginning.
Can you share the link again?
All right. Ankit, we will go to the next artist. We can see you, but we don't see the sharing of the screen, Ankit.
Can you share the link again?
Preeti, kindly share the link again. And Jeff, we will go over to you. Uh, Ankit, if you could bring the focus back to Jeff. So, Jeff, you've created an exciting live works festival just now. You're a writer, curator who devises cross art forms to construct experimental art. One, I would say, how would you define the word hybrid? I mean, we all use it and we are throwing it around these days because we are trying to negotiate with these two different spaces. And your recent project, LiveWorks, talks about live dreams, live futures that present various performances. How would you also share with us the words that you've used, which is live and
Mm.
future in the
Mm,
same, in the same breath almost?
yeah.
And, so taking from how did the whole pandemic challenge, was a catalyst for you to create new hybrid work?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think hybrid is it's a word that's always being tossed around, isn't it? And it's become like the buzzword of the year. Um, but up until this year, the word hybrid really meant to me the fusing together of different artistic disciplines, or when the artistic disciplines collide with disciplines outside of the arts to create something new. And Performance Space, which is the organisation where I work in Sydney, has been around for over 35 years, and it's really always been about this hybrid space, or we also call it a space of experimental art, where artistic disciplines meet and collide and new possibilities are formed. I think in our particular moment right now, hybrid has become a bit of a shorthand for a space that sits half in the digital world and half in the physical world, and that certainly reflects the festival that we delivered this year out of necessity. And I guess just to give some background about that, Performance Space, our organisation, focuses on experimental art. And for the last 6 years, our primary presentation platform has been a big experimental arts festival called LiveWorks. And LiveWorks was born 6 years ago out of our desire to be more international in the work that we were doing, and look not only at Australian work, but the work of our colleagues in the Asia Pacific. So forging connections with artists and organisations from all across the region, and both bringing them to Sydney for the festival, but also making sure that we were sort of in dialogue and participating in experimental arts events through the region. But really, this was the big moment where we drew audiences together and really sort of surveyed and celebrated what was happening in experimental art. And I think here in Australia, we've had a very particular, and in lots of ways, very lucky trajectory with the pandemic. There have been outbreaks of COVID-19 here, and various cities have been in lockdown at various stages of the year. But by and large, I think we've really avoided the worst of it. And at the moment, we're in a phase where restrictions are sort of still in place on physical gatherings and on travel, but they're sort of easing quite rapidly at the moment. But when the pandemic hit us in about March this year, it became very quickly evident that we would not be able to deliver an ordinary LiveWorks festival. The whole of Australia was going into lockdown, and people were making this very rushed kind of move to move their practices online or engage with digital space, because that seemed like the only space where we could make sort of arts events happen. What was forecast then, our festival's in October, and all of this happened in March, is that sort of the restrictions would last for about 6 months before slowly starting to ease. So we had this timeline where, we knew that October, and when we usually hold LiveWorks, was right at that cusp of things beginning to open up again, which gave us a little sort of planning point, that we knew sort of we'd be able to deliver something, but whether it was like entirely online or entirely sort of physical, we didn't know. And so what we developed was a hybrid model, where we sort of planned to do both, essentially. We were anticipating that by October, public gatherings would become possible. For much of this year, public gatherings in Australia have been banned for more than certain like small groups of people. So we knew that public gatherings would be possible again, but those numbers would be very, very restricted from the numbers that we would usually see at the festival. That when the theatres opened up, which was around October, their capacities would be really significantly reduced. We were working with about 30% of capacity across all of the venues at Carriageworks, which is our home venue. And also that international travel would still be very much impossible. And it's, we really established this as an international festival, and that sort of exchange element became very important. So we knew that sort of branching out into the digital space then opened up some possibilities for us to re-engage with our international peers and to have international participants in the festival, even if it was virtually. But we also wanted to create a safe space, because by the end of these restrictions, our audiences here locally were really hungry to come out in person. And, this was one of the first live performance events that happened in Sydney after the restrictions. So there was this hunger just for the arts community to be together again. And for audiences to come out and connect and have a kind of cultural experience. So the whole curation of the festival became very much about weighing up these physical and digital aspects and seeing what the
Did you have people in real life?
We did.
Okay.
We did. But the real life events, there were still quite heavy restrictions in Sydney at the time. So they were very limited capacity, the events. They were about 30% of the audience capacity that we usually cater for. There was a law here that required the capacity of each venue had to accommodate 4 square meters of space per person. So that really dictated the number of people that could come into each venue. People had to be 1.5 meters apart. We had to enforce physical distancing, which, as you can imagine, changes the audience dynamic of a performance quite a lot, and it also affects the audience experience, but also how the artist crafts that work. But, we've kind of felt we're an experimental festival that supports experimental artists. And if we can't find ways of creatively accommodating these restrictions, then who can? So we sort of, with the work that we were commissioning, it was worked into the brief of the artist, and it had to be whether the artist felt like that would still be a valuable experience for them or a relevant experience for them to create a work in this kind of very physically restricted environment.
So what is the kind of space, what is the kind of audience numbers? Big spaces, small spaces, what were you negotiating with? So supposing it was an auditorium for a number of 200 audiences, how many did you actually have?
Yeah, so for example, one of the sort of medium-sized theatre space at Carriageworks had a capacity of 260, and that became about 45 for the festival.
Right.
Yeah, which is a complete transformation of the use of that space, and also loss of box office income for us, and all of these things.
The main issue, yeah.
But the other aspect to that is because a lot of the work we present is experimental, a lot of it doesn't happen in traditional theatres. In audiences that sit in a seating bank for an hour and watch a theatre or dance show. We deal a lot in performance installation or work that's immersive or that is promenade in some way. And actually all of these forms, these more experimental forms, are much better placed to accommodate different kind of audience requirements. And if it's a performance installation where the audience are dispersed throughout the space, it's then much easier to make sure they're 1.5 meters apart from each other. Or if it's in the round, for example, it's about the spacing of the seats. So it was about, working really with the artists, if they were willing to go there, to find the most kind of creative solutions that still, where the work still served its purpose and the work was true to the vision and the idea of the artist, but accommodated the kind of safety measures that we were required to sort of follow through here.
So would you quickly like to show us that clipping, and then we go to further questions?
Sure thing. And what you'll also see here is a lot of the digital work in the festival. So we also made a decision that there were a couple of hybrid events that were live streamed, that were sort of platforms for conversation and works in progress. But for the full scale experimental works where they were digital, we kind of had a premise for ourselves that they couldn't be able to occur in real life. We didn't want to just put a camera in a theatre and live stream passively to our audience. We wanted to commission work that really explored the possibilities of digital space and the things that you can do digitally through performance. And I think, Preeti, this really relates to what you were saying as well, that you couldn't achieve in real life, in a theatre space in real life. So those digital works use the technology in various kind of creative and inventive ways to allow us kind of views of live performance that you wouldn't be able to see if you were in a theatre. And an example of that, I guess, is a dance performance by a choreographer called Sue Healy, which was shot across 1 kilometre of coastal space in New South Wales. And it was live streamed from 2 drones. So the drones were filming and broadcasting the performance live, but they could zoom out to get a 1 kilometre wide scale view of the landscape and the dancers, or they could zoom right in and do an extreme close up of somebody's hands. So, these are all the possibilities that the technology revealed to us in that moment, where we needed to use the technology to make certain kinds of performances happen. But they revealed new things to us about liveness that we wouldn't have discovered if we hadn't staged them, digitally. So I'll just share some of this documentation with you.
Right.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm muted. Thank you, team. So, were all these from 2020, all the glimpses?
Yes, so this was a pretty
Interesting.
comprehensive
So it was
overview of 2020.
right. It was an interesting mix of real time space. That you almost felt that you were there for this festival, and also the virtual space. So over to you, Vikram, now, and I'll come back to Jeff and Preeti also. You've just very successfully concluded Contagion, the festival that talked about, hybridity of the performance spaces that is going to happen or that is already happening. So my question to you that there were so many artists that you had invited and there was a lot of discussion that took place. What are your derivatives from it, and what did you see, watch, hear? What was the discourse like? So if you could share your very recent experience of the Pickle Factory Contagion Festival, of meeting all these different artists from all over the world. And also, how do you relate to hybrid inventions to stay relevant to the present times? What is your take on that? So, yeah, over to you.
Thanks, Raman. Thanks, Raman. And yeah, great to see
Yes.
both Preeti's and Jeff's work. Preeti's work I've been following for a while, and Jeff, it was wonderful to see Carriage Works again, even through the screen, because it is such a wonderful venue. Um, so when the pandemic hit, the Pickle Factory actually was in a bit of a quandary because the Pickle Factory sort of, we have two pillars. We are about developing into a venue, a bricks and mortar venue. We don't have a venue at the moment. We are nomadic, but that's sort of the big dream. And we are very much about the live performance experience. We're really premised on what does the live performance bring to an architectural space, and what does the architectural space do to a live performance. It's not about site-specific work, but really about incorporating the idea of space into how you think of performance. And given that we work with dance and movement uh, defined as broadly as possible, you're basically working with space, time, and body. Um, so, given that that is remains our trust, when the pandemic hit, we couldn't be looking at live at actual venues, and we couldn't be looking at live performance. So that was sort of a bit of a situation for us, where suddenly we were thrown into a position where we had to really question everything that we were doing and how would we go forward.
True.
And for a while, we didn't actually jump onto the online bandwagon because we weren't really clear as to why would we jump on. Um,
Mm,
what would we be adding specifically to
mm,
things that people were already doing? Um, and we did a couple of things with partners when they, sort of asked us to do things with them. But the project Contagion, the whole name is Contagion Performance Space Community. Um, that really came out of something that we'd already begun which last year in 2019, which was about starting discussions about repurposing spaces for the arts, for performance in particular, and was responding to this loss of the live performance experience. And really, when we really started examining it, the loss of the live performance experience, of course, is you're losing the artistic experience, yes, but it's also part of a larger loss that this pandemic has brought for us. It's the loss of actually being able to meet people in real time and space. It's the loss of gathering, and gathering is such a quintessentially human habit and necessity. You don't
true.
get together only for performance. You get together for, just for social gatherings. You get together for political meetings. You get together for sport. You get together for a whole host of human activity, which makes us human beings. We are, man is a social animal. Man
Yes.
tried as cross-gender, not as male. That's something that's a concept we've all grown up with. And I think that's really what the world has lost now. So
Mm.
in through the series, it was a series of curated conversations, 8 curated conversations, addressing the live performance experience as an art and part of the human act of assembly, not as
Nice.
something separate from it. And it was basically looking at gathering spaces and the habit of gathering as a societal need. Within that, the uniqueness of the live performance experience, and really what are the possible ways forward for artists, audiences, venues? That's sort of where we were going, with the idea that per- uh, performance in general, art in general, performance in particular for us, and spaces for performance really are about bringing together and celebrating strong and empathetic communities. That's really what the arts are about. And how
Nice.
does one underline that? And one of the responses actually from somebody living in New York, actually, she wrote to me an email saying it was really heartening to see a really aware and intelligent interrogation of the live experience. I think there was a lot of uh, you know very normal outpouring of grief and loss, expression of loss of the live experience, and perhaps a
Just
lot of
think of,
nostalgia.
yeah,
But really, we thought this was a moment to actually say, okay, what is it that we've lost? How does one look at it, in a sense, objectively, and really say,
yeah,
okay, this is what we need to take forward, and this actually is a lot of baggage we can leave behind. That was really and what we also, as Pickle Factory, tried to do over the series was produce each session, because
mm,
that's what we do for Pickle Factory. It's very important whenever we present something to have a before, a during, and an after. So, what is the whole experience that not just the audience, but the performer and the audience and the
absolutely.
space goes through?
Mm,
So, how were we going to transfer that way of thinking onto an online space? So, each conversation was very, very carefully structured. So we had a script for each
yes,
conversation. We had a cue sheet for each conversation, which was shared which was developed with the speakers. And then you had actually a production team that you would have, like a backstage team, cueing everything during the conversation. That didn't mean it was scripted, but really in terms of time, in terms of what happens how you would make sure that a performance goes through smoothly with a production team. We tried to sort of bring that into how each conversation was designed. And we had a backstage. So after the conversations, you could actually sign up to a separate link and join us backstage. Um, so the audiences could just, it was on Zoom, of course, but the idea of backstage where it's not curated, it's an open area, you can ask anyone
yes,
questions. Of course, it's limited. We did only half an hour, but that sort of experience we tried to bring in as well. Some
yeah,
worked, some didn't work. As Preeti was saying, sometimes you fall flat on your face, sometimes it works. So that's how you learn,
yeah,
and that's sort of how I really believe. In our last session, we had a speaker who sort of used the word hybrid,
mm-hmm.
Vishakha Datta from Bombay, who's with Point of View, and her provocation was really: are we in a place where do we still believe that the body ends where the skin meets air, or has the body extended into digital space? And um, for an organization that is really tied to the body where movement resides, that was a very interesting proposition. And if the body has really moved into digital space, then as a venue or a conceptual venue that wants to present movement work, which is based in the body, how do we then respond to that provocation? So we have to exist in both spaces, and that's the challenge that I think we're all facing now. It's not particular to people actually. But just to wind up, I'd like to share
Yeah,
a video, snippets of one session, which was session 6, and we called that Community Catalysts. And it
right.
features four guests: Pamela Lopez from Chile, Sudhanba Deshpande from Delhi, Shilpika Bordoloi from Jorhat in Assam, and Ahmed Sura from Burkina Faso. So four very different places, and all of them run venues. And really, it was about, okay, what is a performance venue? Not when you look at art and you look at society, and these four really are inspirations for the bigger factory. So I'm just going to share that with you.
For everyone. And in Chile, particularly, the political spectrum of ideas is very wide. You can find people from all types of thoughts and ideologies. I mean, it's trying to be a welcoming space just for everyone. In my region, there is a kind of a community gathering which was established in the 14th century. And these kind of community setups are part of the across all the countries. Vikram, there's a sound problem, right? We are unable to hear.
My community in Burkina Faso, but can be also Africa, because that also mirroring a bit the vision of my play that can be work also in every place. As Pamela said, if we move it there, we have to readapt with the community there, and I think it's gonna work. And that's why I think community they are the best thing to really take as a source of imagination, or as even creating a venue there that they also can mirror themselves. That's why my place called Nyogono is a place where we get to know each other. Sometimes forget that agriculture is actually a culture, and art is also culture. There's something quite fundamentally common to both, which is when you put something into the ground and when you shut it, and when you give all that you give is conditions, when you create the conditions in which that thing can grow, the seed can grow. Physical space, it's just it's quite elementary, right? It's elementary to the space of art and culture, because without that, the space to make, the space to create, meet, space to share, it's elemental to the making of what we make every day. Even if it's an outdoor space, indoor space, type of area, whatever it is, but there is a space, right? Like there is the idea of physical space, quite elementary and forward to making. Must know that we are not only artistic spaces, we are also political spaces as well. And when I say political, I don't mean only in the political partidist way, I mean the political sense that we have to make a call for action in order to be part in our spaces of the society and the political scheme of the people. The paradigm that I think we both work together, and that is something I find in common between us, is the paradigm of service and the mission of working together as catalyzed spaces. It's important, I believe, to create these little spaces, little pockets, resistance. And by resistance, what does one mean? One means something very simple, which is the ability to just speak with them.
Right. I know there was a sound problem that was happening in Preeti's also. There was a time lapse happening when Ankit was trying to show. So, Ankit, you can tell us in the chat whether you would share or Ruhani can share Preeti's link. But otherwise, as all of us have discussed already for the audience, that we are going to share the links on all our platforms. Now, this is another thing, Vikram, Jeff, and Preeti, that I wanted to discuss, that we've all kind of shared the negotiations that all of us are trying to do. I mean, we at the Creative Arts Academy, we've launched the academy, we're running the courses online. There are a few interesting things that have happened, that we got connected globally. We're all there, and I don't want to lose that. Even though I'm having all these problems with technology in the class, in the workshop, during a live performance, but connection with you, Jeff, connection with Preeti, even Vikram sitting in Salt Lake, I don't want to do lose these connections. So how do we negotiate between what Vikram was saying, that the touch, the feel, the smell, the live. That's why they are called live performances. Otherwise, all of us would be doing films. So why is it that we really look forward to a live performance? We in fact dress up, we go to the theater. It's like a whole ceremony that we all get involved. I mean, it's not just the characters or the dancers getting ready to perform. It's also the audience who gets ready for that experience, for that exchange, the breath, the whole feeling and the emotion that we go through together. So a lot of Vikram's discussions were, during the festival, talking about that. And my question is that, what are we going to retain? I mean, there was so much of Jeff in your live works thing that you were trying to, the social distancing was happening, which I feel is still going to stay in the world for another 5 6 months. And for 1 year, the post-pandemic effects on so many of us, that we wouldn't be able to take off our masks. If we, I mean, okay, so yesterday was my first outing, and I went to the mall because it was my hubby's birthday. And I was walking like this. I said, there are people here. And my family was having a big laugh. They said, yes, there are people. So, I mean, of course, if I was in theater, I would have gone all crazy with the excitement and happiness. But it was in a mall. So it wasn't one of my favorite spaces. So I was like this. So that's going to be a reality that all of us are going to face. So over to you, Preeti. You were talking to me over the phone about some, um, new works that you are looking at, and some negotiations with spaces that you are looking at. How do you think you're going to be as an artist and as a performer who's dealing with her audiences? And what are your plans in near future?
Thank you for asking me that. I mean, it's fascinating to watch Jeff and Vikram's works at the same time, hear what they're saying, because it's pretty much what I believe in as well. I personally feel that we're entering a brand new phase. What that is, we don't know. We're basically like toddlers learning how to walk. We're
Oh, yeah.
figuring out how to walk again. Um, because we just can't go back. It's not, I don't think it's going to be what it used to be.
Mm.
It has to be like what will be. And I think that is the excitement, the nervousness, and everything that comes with it. So, Jeff, when you talk about the drones, for instance, we're working on a new production that's based in a 19th century French opera. And we're getting into a bubble residency in January. We're going to be working there and coming back to the Guggenheim to perform it. But we're in the rotunda, and nobody else is on the same floor. Everybody's up on tiers, and it's like, wow, okay. You think, well, let me think. The original sketch
Yeah.
pad did not have that in mind. But the idea of drones, all those kinds of things, when you rehearse itself, start to play, a huge. I would say that we have new
Yes.
collaborators, unexpected collaborators. And it's about discovering who these new collaborators are. The drone is a new collaborator. How do you operate this as a new collaborator? How do you bring the senses back to life? The touch, the smell, the visual, all of that is a completely different mode of, almost like, how do you marry an AI with what we know? and bring those two together, because not many of us can just be very slick film producers and directors, because that's not what we started out to do. But it's not to say that we're afraid of the film media, but we also can't be amazing directors for the film because that's their specialization. So my whole interest is, two things, two areas, is exactly what Vikram actually said. The body. What is it? We're porous. So what is porosity anymore? Where does one begin and one end, without making it overly academic? Because I'm a practitioner, so I had to think from a very practical point of view as well. I do this art, and the other thing is audio. When you get into a non-live space or even a hybrid space, suddenly the soundscape, the landscape of sound starts to become actually number one priority. And for me, that's become this new question. So how do you hear a body? Like, it's not just clapping
Yes.
like this, but really, like, what is the soundscape the body's inhabiting? So it's a it's not a brand new question, but it's definitely a question more in the forefront these days, because we're facing what you call a post production. You're facing choices even before you make these things, with technology facing you. And the hybrid performance idea I was talking to you, Ramanjit, is that our entire production is the setting of a reality TV show, and therefore now we're facing this whole real problem of how to make it live with an interactive audience. And again, like Jeff, what you're saying,
Yeah.
socially distanced audience, but then open up the global audience simultaneously when you can live stream, but give them the similar feel of what live people can, and something different at the same time. So it's a multi-layered challenge, but it's a very exciting space to be in, because it's a constant discovery. It's like, if you saw it this way, how would she see it that way? But it's the same story, and it's happening at the same time. Because ultimately, for me, I don't want to get lost in the issues of multiple spaces, locations, special effects, and all
Mm.
of that. To me, ultimately, it's the storytelling.
Yes.
If everything was stripped away and I just sat in front of you right now and told you the story, you should be equally interested.
Mm.
Because that's what it is. If you go
Mm.
to a village and sit there, a suspension of disbelief, you sit there and you look at an old man coming and telling about a young prince, he becomes a young prince. He doesn't
Mm.
need anything fancy at the end of the day. But the question is, how do we take that and put it in this platform now and create that magic from that very simple line? um, is the kind of work we're trying to develop. So it's so we have voices, we have actors, we have dancers. We're working with ballet and contemporary and Indian dancers and all of that, but we're also thinking so much about sound, much more than I really have all my career so far. So that's I am really, on one hand, looking forward to it. On the other hand, talks like these sort of expose me and make me understand much more because of pure experience. Like, everybody's going through something simultaneously, so we ourselves are forming a community that is
Mm.
informing our works, which I think is what Ramanjit is saying, that I don't want to lose this, because, but I also don't think we will.
Yeah.
I'm pretty optimistic.
You
So
find ways and ways of
I think we'll
being
continue, because
together.
I think there's a new curiosity. Like, I'm curious about our talk today with the others, as
Mm.
to others will be about other talks. And
Mm.
very soon we've become this very chatty community globally, which is fun.
Because I already have the earlier panelists, in a mail thread talking to each other very intensely, I would say. And
Yeah.
it's very strange that you talk about sound, because I remember my session with Vikram
Yeah.
during Contagion, and sound was one aspect, Vikram, if you remember, I brought forward that how the raw quality of the body, and also the breath, and also the soundscape of the body that you pointed out, that how that also changes once we shift to digital space. So, the experience kind of changes, and how we're going to negotiate with that. So, Jeff, with this, and Preeti, we will definitely try to even look at your, or maybe Ruhani or Ankit, if we can look at Preeti's slide now, that would be lovely. We have missed the soundscape of Vikram thanks to technology, and you all will have the link available on all the platforms so that you can hear, because artists are saying something very, very crucial. I personally know that. So do take out time to watch it.
It was early morning and my mother was hunting when I heard the voices of the men. I was 5 days old and my eyes were barely open, a helpless kitten in the den. Then a hand reached out and scooped me up, and a voice said, "Hello, little friend. Hello, little friend." And he carried me off to the city of men, and nothing was ever the same again. And he carried me to the city of men, and nothing was ever the same again. Those first few months I was petted and spoiled with human cubs. I purred and played, but the humans grew bored, and I grew. How I grew, they began to be afraid. And they tore out my clothes and put a collar on my neck and put me on display in a collar on parade. And I was chained and shamed in the city of men, and nothing was ever the same again. And I was chained and shamed in the city of men, and nothing was ever the same again. I lived for years in the city of men, and there I became enlightened. A human can be the kindest of creatures, except when she's bored or frightened. Yes, beware of the human who is frightened. I was chained and shamed in the city of men, and nothing was ever the same again. I was chained and shamed in the city of men, and nothing was ever the same again.
That was lovely. I'm so glad we got
Thank
to saw
you.
it, got to see it. Jeff, over to you. Preeti has shared, how she's looking at. What do you think the next Live Works Festival is going to be? Are you going to? How much of digital space are you going to engage with? Is it going to be mainly to reach out for audiences? Because as Vikram knows, right now, our new space for Creative Arts Academy is ready, but the whole texture is going to change, because even the terrace, for example, is going to have this social distancing cafe performances. The classes are going to have technology that will allow teachers like Jeff and Preeti engage with the students in India, and students from all over to see a teacher in Calcutta. So we are hoping that we'll be able to create enough digital, bandwidth and everything for these things to happen smoothly. That is my pure engagement with the digital that I'm looking at, apart from few technologies that I already use in my performance, for example, optical illusion or anything like that. But as an artist, how much of digital involvement do you see in your performances? And we'll take these last questions quickly, then, talk to each other and wind up the session.
Sure. Well, I totally agree with Priti that I think, things have changed kind of permanently now. And I think it won't be back to business as usual for some years, and possibly ever, that we'll go back to sort of business as usual as we thought it was before. And I sort of refer back to Vikram's point as well about this idea of, not only in the pandemic this year, actually, but like, where is the boundary between the physical and the digital body? And I think we've been moving in this way, like, for a number of years now, with sort of our increasing reliance on the internet and on social media technologies to represent ourselves and to stay connected. And I think what's happened is it's just accelerated during the pandemic much more quickly than it otherwise have would. So I feel like we've been through this very rapid phase of evolution and prototyping, that we've all learned a lot of lessons from being sort of rushed into it this year that we'll be unpacking for the next few years. So I feel like whatever the trajectory of the pandemic is, we've developed all of this kind of curiosity and all of this kind of curatorial knowledge about the capacity of technology to connect us, and what kinds of things are possible in the digital realm that might not be possible in real life. So I see the future as a hybrid future, really, and that, that these are really urgent and important questions, not only in the context of the pandemic, but in the context of where we're going as civilizations and as societies, as we sort of move our lives further and further into the digital realm. I think it's urgent that we engage with digital spaces. But I equally completely agree that this kind of physical connection and sensory activation and sharing a space together in real life is super important from a perspective of ritual and from a different kind of societal perspective. So for me, the future is definitely a hybrid future, and it's about how these things can intertwine with each other, and also coexist in their own space to the maximum possible effect. So I think the future of LiveWorks for us is definitely a hybrid LiveWorks, and the next few years will just be sort of going deeper into these questions that we opened up through the festival this year.
Right. Over to you, Vikram. You have been trying to find out, how important the performance spaces is, and that was your whole dialogue with all the artists that came during Contagion, and that's why this whole, questioning of the body and the exchange of the audience and the performer and in the space. So my question to you is, how do you, as an artist and a curator, look at this performance space that you are hoping to establish very soon? And I wish you all the best, hopefully in near future. Do you think that that space will also, how much of digital involvement do you see in that space? And also vis-a-vis Contagion, when you plan the next festival, is it going to be digital, or are we going to look at what we saw of Pickle Factory last year, where we went to different spaces?
Um, well, two or three things. I think one is that I agree with Jeff completely, that there is no getting away from the fact that the future has to be something that brings both these things together. I think it would be a bit of an, being an ostrich if one was to ignore that and pretend that come out tomorrow saying, "Oh, let's all meet and hug each other in hundreds." It's not going to happen. And regardless of the trauma of the pandemic, I think it's a good thing in the sense that it to look at the digital as Preeti was also saying, as another avenue for us. It's not a replacement of life, um, and it's not film. It is a third new thing that's an opportunity that's opened up for us to explore. And how does one approach it with that kind of positivity rather than say, "Oh, I can't do this, so let me do that." It has to be another sort of arrow in our quiver. Um, Having said that, especially living in a country like India, where digital access is not even a dream for many, many, many people in our country. And I'm not saying that say what Pickle Factory has done or urban venues and urban centers have been the most accessible spaces either. There are other problems there because we're living in a divided society. Definitely in India and across the world, we live in various kinds of divided societies. So it's not necessary just that you have a bricks and mortar space, that it's an open access for everyone. But the in the Indian context specifically, where digital access is so so prohibitive and so niche, are we creating another kind of division, another kind of exclusivity? Is a question that we
Very
have to
important.
address. We have to
Yeah.
address that, especially if we're saying, especially for Pickle Factory, and especially for I think all of us on this panel, and definitely I hope for most artists across the world, that uh, whatever art you create is about taking something to communities, right? It's about that communication,
Yes.
and we have to keep in
It's
mind
about
that
bringing
while
communities together, in fact,
absolutely,
rather than
and
the other way around.
we
Yeah.
have to keep that context in mind, that it's that who is going to do that work of
Yeah.
creating digital access for
Yeah.
communities and people who don't have it. It's not necessary that the answer to that is artists have to go out and do it, but we have to insist that that gets done somehow
Yes.
as well. And definitely as a venue, as when we're talking about space, whether it's a physical space or conceptual space, that is a space that needs to be nurtured and expanded equally, um, to make sure that this plurality of voices, the inclusivity that people was talking about, all that don't remain ideas, but really get implemented in the best possible way. There is no utopian solution. There never will be. Um, but to be aware of these things as curators, as artists, as presenters, as just concerned, and not even concerned, but just reasonably intelligent members of society, to be aware that we do live in a world that is divided, that is becoming more and more polarized, and that the digital, for all that it promises, also carries the danger of further polarization and further isolation, very, very much. And in the world we
Very,
live in today, very, very important to be aware of that, I feel.
very, very important question raised, Vikram, and we really need to look into it seriously and not go blindly, especially for a country like India. We can come in a gallery space, Ankit, now, and I would like to ask all of you that all these very challenging situations that we are going to have at least for another year, something beautiful is coming out from being boxed, which I think Preeti also referred to, Anita Ratnamdi's box series. I was also a part of it. We have actually been unboxed because so many new antennas and new stirrings have happened within our minds and hearts, and that have given reactions from the artists, negotiations of space, of mind, of heart of collaborations, have happened and opened so many new doors and windows. Post Posed a lot of challenges. Those challenges further have helped us create newer stuff and raise new questions. So my question is also about finances. I know we are running out of time, but if quickly we could react to how we're going to handle the financial situation in the coming year. Of course, funding should happen and it should come from corporates and governments. I'm not looking at that as performers or curators or people who will be looking at spaces in another 4 5 months. How are we going to look at this box office that you were talking about, Jeff? And all of us need to question that if we are going to have 45 people in a space of 260, or have a classroom of 10 students in a space of 20, or a cafe theater which has 50 but we have only 15 sitting there, how are we going to handle the box office situation? Is there a way out? Can we have audience available to us virtually? Of course, Vikram's question taken into consideration. Um, can we reach out to the audience virtually while a live performance is going on? Can that help box office? So I'm just throwing the question open to the gallery. Anyone can start.
I can start on this. It's a big question. I think there's a lot of questions happening here in Australia about sort of access around financial access to digital programs, but also how you value them against in real life kind of performance experience. And so LiveWorks this year for us was a mixture of the digital programs were a mixture of free and ticketed, just sort of trialing different approaches. And I think, there has to be some kind of approach to digital ticketing and monetizing those digital performances. Otherwise, I don't think they'll get valued in the same way. And, the gesture of making one experience free while the other one's ticketed is a value statement. So I think we need to get a little bit more sophisticated around our sort of ticketing and our box office strategies to make sure we're giving the digital an equal weight, actually an equal importance to the other sort of programming streams that we pursue. So that's like sort of one side of the financial puzzle for us is what that mix is, because also, as with the In Real Life festival that we run, there's always a mixture of free and ticketed events with these questions of broader access, maintaining broader access, but also being financially sustainable in mind. So, maybe it's a hybrid financial model as well as a hybrid digital IRL model.
Yeah. Also, I feel that the question is just now Rangashankara in Bangalore and a lot of other companies all across the world are doing, live or a recorded showcasing of performances. Even Jairangam is doing they are showcasing some beautiful plays on YouTube. But my question is that are we also going to look at while the play is going on live, there is audience watching, not the later on they are watching the recording through different platforms. So, are we looking at a huge camera, looking at a performance, screening it live? So just a question. Preeti, over to you.
I think I think it's a possibility and a yes to that, because it's one of the things we're looking into our next production, to see how can we have simultaneous experience and also multi-location experience. Coming from the live world, I don't think anything can really replace the liveness of art, because it is a commitment. I think that the idea of either going as audience or being a performer for a piece, it's a commitment that takes you away from everything else in life and places you in a common space. And you're willing, both performer and audience, to be shifted by that, the whole phenomenology of it. So it's and that is what makes us think as a community and feel as a community, even if we don't voice it at that time. It's a truly shared experience. I think with the challenge with the digital media is the lack of attention span.
Yes,
as I'm speaking to
absolutely.
you, I can always look up there if something else
Yeah.
comes, or look
Look
around
at your
here,
phone.
because you're fragmented. So you have high on one side, you have very high level of focus and stamina that has been developed over time. And on the other side that we are living now is this fragmentation, this kaleidoscopic sort of focus. Um, and I'm being very non-judgmental about it, because if I judge, I've already failed. So I have
Mhm.
to look at both, and I have to see, all right, well, this is what's going on. They're like polar opposite sort of situations in which
Mm.
these two have been given to us this year. And I don't think there's a right or wrong answer, because I think we're all still very early in the game. So it'd be very difficult to say we
Very.
should do this or do that. But as Jeff was saying, one of the things I wonder to add to that is to have like pop-ups or mobile performances, how you sometimes have in villages, learn from the past in some ways that can be very innovative for the future. You have a finite number of people who can come and watch you, but you can run the show a few times and then pack up your tent and go to another place. In some ways it makes it very accessible, very doable, really. And also you're ending up sometimes just incorporating things in places you go to, so which means that you're including one way or the other the community and their aesthetics into what you're doing. So having uh, that sort of fluidity to do that, almost like taking your container and traveling with it, and it just becomes a performance space. You wrap it up and you go again, because you
Yeah.
can only accommodate so many people, and that itself is a choreographic choice. That is a architectural design choice, like what you were saying,
Absolutely.
Vikram. Saying they don't have to feel that they're socially distanced. Maybe that's part of the arrangement of the design of the theater, so that you create that feeling that this is not because of COVID. This is a new way of looking, because we were thrown into something else.
Yeah.
That's what I feel, going at it from the conundrum of being a choreographer and a director of works. But I
Yeah.
really feel for presenters like you, Jeff, where there's so much dependent on box office sales, and
Yeah.
there's a mutual dependency for people like you and I, but at the same time, there's this high definition of what space should be, and how producers have looked at it for some time, and to change their minds is bigger than changing artists' minds, because we're always very malleable.
Would you like to add something to that, Vikram?
Um, yeah, I agree. I'm glad that you brought up the various points about the seating arrangement, for example, because one of the things that we've actually looked at as an advantage in Pickle Factory is that we're not a venue yet. I actually feel very much for venues that already exist.
Yeah.
What are they going to do now? Especially in India, where you don't have very definitely in Calcutta, you do have very few venues with flexible seating or black boxes or studio spaces. It's all for traditional proscenium. What the hell are they going to do? While with the Pickle Factory, we are a conceptual venue, so this is an opportunity to actually redesign the venue any way we feel. We don't have to redesign an existing space. Any space we walk into, we that's a creative challenge for us. That how are we going to set up the audience
Becomes the
experience and
site.
the performer experience? The other thing that both of you have mentioned about the simultaneity of and what Raman is saying, the difference between streaming a pre-recorded performance and a live performance. I think, Preeti, what you've already spoken about as to how do you bring in the experience of the senses and the shared experience of that in the same
Mm.
moment in a digital medium, in a video experience. I think we as people who work in live performance are going to have to really learn to work with people who come from that experience, because their digital experience, video art, they do that. And we have to find what is this third way that we can work together. So it's not video art, it's not live performance, but it's something that both of us create together. So what are those conversations? For example, in the last couple of weeks, I've been part of two such things, two different parts of the world. I performed at the Konark Festival in
Yeah,
Odisha, which was live streamed on DD Bharati.
which was
You had a
live.
live audience. Yeah, you had a live audience there. It's an open air, huge stage, so they could do it. But then
Yeah,
you look at and it's living on YouTube now. When you look at the YouTube thing and you say, I really would like to train camera people. How do you shoot movement? You need to
yeah,
have some conceptual understanding of dance and movement, and you have to have a conversation with the creator of the piece before you just go and place a camera anywhere and shoot any old house.
yeah,
And strangely, I've come to expect that in India, and definitely, even though Doordarshan, the national channel, has actually good content compared to many other channels, I've
yeah,
come to expect that okay, here's a camera, you do your thing in front of it, and the cameraman walks away. Um, but strangely, also for a project I did in Cyprus, we created this piece completely through Zoom, but it was performed live for a small live audience. It was streamed, and again, that's now available on YouTube. And even there, I was thinking, you really haven't bothered to. It's shot very well, but shooting something very well and communicating what the creator wishes to communicate are two very different things. And we have to find ways of actually working with these people who are now going to be the via media for us in order to communicate as artists. And again, as venues and presenters, how do we set up these conversations between the artists we present and between the people, with the people who are going to actually be doing the digital version of that? How do we
yeah,
make sure that everyone is on the same page so that what the artist wishes to get across to a live audience is also brought across to a digital audience? And of course, the experiences are different. And Jeff, as you were saying, you have to have a hybrid financial model. You can't. But I would say that the hybrid financial model is a sort of spectrum. Sometimes the live experience costs more and the digital experience costs less. But it could also be the
yeah.
reverse, that something is actually made more for a digital experience and less for a live experience. There's also that option.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So one just has
I
to look
wondered.
case by
I
case basis.
once, I wanted to add something to what Vikram said. It just made me wonder if it sounds to me like there's a great opportunity to matchmake. Since we all know about arranged marriages, in a way, we're in a situation of wondering how can we matchmake exactly as you were saying, Vikram. The digital media. One is collaborating with a camera person who is not a documenter, but just a very skillful creative camera person. On the other hand, also the editor is the equal choreographer because it's coming out in digital media. The editing is so important. And at the same time, Jeff, I'm thinking in terms of financing and funding, I just wonder if partnerships can be formed with well-known camera people or directors or editors alongside choreographers, and for the kind of work that they can bring their works together rather than being dictated by one or the other, and the two worlds, because the patrons and the producers exist very differently for those two worlds. If those two worlds are brought together, then you're actually making a lot of matchmaking out there, and you're sort of generating a new sort of hybrid. You're talking about a hybrid, right, Space?
Yeah,
A hybrid in terms of how we can make established producers begin to see something differently, because ultimately they carry the purses, the money purses. So we may have some great ideas, but a lot of those cannot take flight if it's not funded, which has been our perennial issue as live performers. But I think if we have this opportunity of marrying two creators who are exciting but can challenge each other, help push each other's boundaries more, and you have people who backed both sides and says, if you're bringing these two together, I'll jump in. Not because they're necessarily already famous and they don't have to worry about it, but I'm just saying about these two are part of our series of people we want to matchmake, and we want you to jump on and help us push this forward. It's just popped in my head listening to the two of you speak.
So this brings This brings to my mind some of the experiments that have recently happened. Even the box series of Anita Ratnam, these opened up a lot of these marriages. And recently, Rangashankara, as I pointed out, Neelam Mansingh Chaudhary's performance, Black Box, where she created a play with Vansh Bhardwaj, and Kabir Chaudhary, another very amazing filmmaker. He shot it. So both of them did their work in collaboration, in sync, and yet they were two different mediums getting married in a very interesting manner. And recently, I ended up doing another one with Rajesh Gupta, another friend of mine. So exactly what happened, Preeti, I gave him one improvised shot for every scene, but what how he negotiated with his camera, well, and I knew that he was one person who could do it. I couldn't get a documentary filmmaker. So very rightly pointed out all the issues that we would need for getting this marriage happen. And of course the funding can come from both the fields and must come from both the fields for this marriage to actually finally happen. So I think now it's time for us to wind up this, and yet I think I see it as a beginning of a dialogue which should continue, and we should keep inspiring each other in terms of different marriages, love affairs, and in these different mediums, and bringing them forward to the audience. But anything that any one of you want to say before we say bye to our audiences who've been patiently listening to us or will listen to us?
I just want to
Jeff
I
wanted
just
to
think,
say something since
yeah,
a
Jeff,
long
go.
time. Yes, Jeff, over to you.
Oh, I just totally agree with you, Preeti. That I think it's we've got to look to the artists to into who are always open to experimentation and putting at the edges anyway. And I just think this is the next frontier of experimentation. So as a curator and as a presenter, I look to what artists are doing for the inspiration and for our next steps in terms of how we adapt and change our model. And I was talking to a colleague after LiveWorks. Somebody asked in a public forum the question of what's the opportunity out of this time, because there's been so much talk of catastrophe and calamity, and she said that she sees the opportunity of this time as for artists to just go totally wild and to invent forms and invent media that we haven't even dreamed of yet. And I think we're in this kind of catalyzing moment at the moment that's been a disaster, but it's also very exciting. And I think
Yeah.
I just am very excited to see where artists take us next.
Absolutely. Vikram, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of extend Preeti's metaphor of matchmaking, and Raman, your suggestion that we have more love affairs. You know that art is generally art's practice is generally promiscuous, and this is a great opportunity for much more promiscuity.
Lovely.
Yeah, I think we should celebrate that
Yes.
promiscuity and stop being monogamous. Because that's not what art is. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
Lovely.
I totally agree with you on that, Vikram. Totally agree
Completely
with you. And I think the more the merrier.
Yes, yes. Well, lovely. This has been very stimulating. We had the least number of panelists in this session, and we have been the longest session. So, obviously, there's so much dialogue required, and we will continue to have this dialogue. We thank Jairangam for offering us this opportunity to have this dialogue over here at their platform. Thank you, Team Jairangam, for being there. And Jeff, Preeti, and Vikram have been sharing their links. I would request all of you to send them to me by WhatsApp also, so that I make sure that they have been posted on all the platforms, because this chat will be gone now when we say bye. Um, Also, I would request the audience to stay in tune with the whole of Jairangam Festival, which is showcasing some amazing performances, extremely interesting workshops, and very stimulating webinars. Tomorrow is our fourth webinar, which talks about curating and creating. And reimagining, redevising new artworks during and post pandemic times. So tomorrow we will have Shonjoy Roy, Anita Ratnam, Bhai Baldeep Singh, Kwasar Padamsi, and Samara Hersh from Australia sharing their works. And this will be 11:30 a.m. India time and 5 p.m. Australia time. On 18th, we have Roberto Proceda, and that's Reimagining 2, Part 2, and which is the fifth webinar. Roberto Proceda, who's an amazing person about sound, he's created a new software for sound, Preeti. So do catch that webinar. And we have Mita Kaushik from UK. He's joining us from Italy, Roberto. And Mita Kaushik from UK, and we have Marian Coutarel from France joining us and sharing the work that they have been reimagining and redevising. So please stay in tune and do watch all the webinars. I really thank you, Vikram, Preeti, and Jeff. Difficult timelines for Preeti and Vikram. So thank you for taking out time and coming on board. Thank you, Jeff, for showcasing so much about live works and sharing your experiences. So thank you so much and
Thank
have a
you.
wonderful day. You have a wonderful evening, Jeff. Thank you,
Thanks,
audience.
everyone. Bye.
Bye. Bye. See you soon.